We have reached the Bryan Woo portion of the program. Excited to talk about him. Somebody that I was pretty sure was going to make an appearance for the Mariners in 2023. Didn't think he was going to make as many appearances as he did, but that's what happened when you have injuries to two of your key starters. Some really good, some really shaky, and some reason for optimism, and maybe some reason for concern as well. We'll get into all of it. But before we get into all of it, I'll give you something that's never shaky and never has reason for concern. It's the good people of Simply Seattle and simplyseattle.com, the very best in Seattle sports gear, whether you're looking for stuff for your Mariners, your Sonics, your Kraken, your Storm, your Huskies, your Cougars, your Seahawks, your FC Ballard, anybody, the Tacoma Rainiers. You can find it all at simplyseattle.com. Great shirts, hats, hoodies, whatever you're looking for, you can find it there. Once you find all that great stuff and you've piled up the checkout page, go to the little code thing, enter MollyWhop15, and it takes 15% off of your order. That's MOLLYWHOP15. Automatically takes that off for you. Great little discount for you. Get your holiday shopping done. Get your holiday shopping done quick, effective, and cheap with simplyseattle.com. There is a link in the description. So Bryan Woo, all of 23 years old, a sixth-round pick out of California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo, better known as Cal Poly. He ends up making a total of 18 starts for your Seattle Mariners in 87 2/3 innings. He has a 4.21 ERA, 93 strikeouts, 31 walks, allows 13 homers. Let's just go over some more stats here. That's an ERA plus of 96, just slightly below average, an FIP of 4.36, a whip, if you're into that sort of thing, of 1.209, strikeout per 9.5, walk per 3.2, so about 3 strikeouts to every walk. And in fact, I think 93 to 31 is exactly 3 to 1, isn't it? And isn't that the number I just gave you? Yeah. Okay. I thought Bryan Woo showed a lot of improvement as the year went on, and that's not a surprise. That's usually how it goes, especially for pitchers like Bryan Woo, who rely on throwing strikes, right? Like, you usually see those guys get better as the year goes on because, look, what a lot of young pitchers have to improve is their command, right? Or their ability to throw consistent strikes. For the most part, Bryan Woo did that. Not at an elite level, but for the most part, that's what he did. And let's just take a look at the Baseball Savant page, because most of this stuff is pretty darn good. His expected ERA was in the 80th percentile at 3.45. His expected batting average of 219 was in the 79th percentile at 2.219. Average exit velocity of 87.4, 82nd percentile. Whiff percentage, 65th percentile at 28.1. So 28.1% of the time, he ended a swing with a swing and miss. 25.1% of the time, he ended with a strikeout. That's in the 62nd percentile of pitchers who qualified. Well above average in barrel rate, well above average in hard hit percentage, and he generates pretty darn good extension for somebody who's not short at 6'2", but, you know, we're not talking about Randall K. Johnson here. We're talking about an average size pitcher who is still able to get the baseball in on hitters at an above average rate. And look, that first start for Bryan Woo, disaster. Absolute disaster. The exact opposite, really, of Bryce Miller's first start. And you're going to compare Bryan Woo and Bryce Miller. You can't help it. You can't help it. They're both pitchers who made the jump from Double-A, who were considered your best starting pitching prospects in the system. With all due respect to Emerson Hancock, both considerably better starting pitching prospects at that point. And even though Hancock still counts as a prospect, come on. Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo have passed him by a long, long shot. And that's not really an insult to Hancock. It's more a compliment to these guys. Let's take a look at what the main reason I think I'm excited about Bryan Woo. I knew it was a mistake to bring up Bryce Miller. because Bryce Miller, Bryan Woo, Bryce Miller. It's tough for me. I'm not good at it anyway, but then you've got two similar sounding names. Come on. Let's look at what his numbers were for the pitches he threw. Because his fastball, especially his four-seamer, really effective. Hitters hit 207 against it, and they were lucky to do that. Expected batting average on his four-seam fastball at .192. That's awesome. Expected slugging of 358. Folks, there are some people whose four-seam fastball we're talking about in the sluggings in the 450, 500 range. In 407, you know, it doesn't like ring. You're not making a banner for it, but that's a good number. And a 358 expecting slugging percentage. That just tells you how much spin this guy gets on his fastball. That's so impressive. And his sinker, just as good, really. Hitters hit 213 off that. They were a little bit, that's a little bit lucky according to expected batting average, but not really. 234. Slugged 372 against it. Cutter, 238 expected batting average against. Slider, expected batting average of 208. And the highest of all those pitches for batting average was 261. Generated whiff percentages above 30% with his four-seamer, with his cutter, and with his slider. Did not get a lot of whiffs with the sinker, but an effective pitch. An effective pitch to be sure. But there's no doubt that his four-seam fastball right now, and this is true for Bryce Miller as well, has a chance to be an elite offering. There's no denying the upside here. It would be foolish if he did. Absolutely a fool's errand to try to deny the upside here. I want to see him use the cutter and slider more. 72% of his pitches were fastballs. 15% cutter. And if you count the cutter kind of as a different kind of fastball, got to get comfy again. That's 87% of the time that you're throwing fastballs and cutters. 12% of the time you're using your slider and your changeup, and he threw one curveball. And my guess is that was just a classification thing where they called a slider a curve. It went 76 miles per hour, so I don't know. But yeah. All of the metrics here for Bryan Woo are really impressive. I've said really way too much in this thing. I have some concerns. And not really long-term concerns. I have concerns about trusting him as a full-go starter for what should be a World Series contender, or at least that should be the goal for 2024. The spin's really impressive. The command still has work to be done. And I know we talked about, the throwing strikes and a walk percentage of 49%. It's below average, but I think he did a pretty darn good job of filling the strike zone. Maybe not quite as good of a job filling the strike zone with his hitting spots. I saw, and this is eye test stuff, Bryan Woo miss his spot quite a bit. There was quite a bit of watching Big Dumper or whoever was behind the plate have to move that glove. Let me use that hand because that would be the actual strike pose. Oh, I'm just a really weird guy. Imagine this is your first video watching me. Anyway, there are some command issues, and I don't think he offers a ton of deception in his delivery either. It's one of the reasons why, and some of this has to do with the fact that, hey, you're sitting fastball with Bryan Woo. Chase rate in the 38th percentile is really bad, 27.9%. Bryan Woo has to give hitters a reason to swing at pitches outside of the strike zone. Certainly something you can improve on. But I think it has to take a major jump forward in 2024. Let me tell you the biggest reason of concern for me with Bryan Woo. I got to pause the video because I want to make sure I have this stat. I could have been gone for hours. You just don't know. But it was about 30 seconds. I just wanted to make sure I had it right in front of me. So there are a lot of splits that you can look at on Baseball Reference. A lot of them. And one of them that you can look at is by team. And if you go to the very bottom of the by team section, you can look at not just they have the interleague, they have the starts he made, teams he made starts against. And let me just list them off for you. Los Angeles, Arizona, Chicago White Sox, Cincinnati Reds, Houston Astros, Minnesota Twins, New York Yankees, Oakland Athletics, San Francisco Giants, Texas Rangers, Toronto Blue Jays, and Washington Nationals. Those are the teams he pitched against. He made multiple starts against the Angels, the Rangers, the Athletics, and the White Sox. A total of 18 starts. But if you go to the very bottom of that page, it will give you something called WP greater than 500 and WP under 500. And he made exactly 9 starts against both of those qualifiers. Let me give you the numbers against teams that were under 500. But before I do that, let me give you a caveat. This is true for a lot of pitchers. It is harder to have success against teams that are good than it is against teams that are bad. What a shocker. I'll give you a second to sit down. So you're always going to see the stats, for the most part, much better against bad teams than they are against good teams. This is also true about, like, you might take a look at somebody's statistics of hitting in wins versus hitting in losses. And you'll be like, wow, look how good he was in wins compared to how bad he was in losses. Well, no kidding, he was bad in losses. They lost. That's how this works. So obviously, it is harder to have success against teams that are good versus teams that are bad. Okay, we got that out of the way. But it's very interesting because there were 186 plate appearances against teams he was facing that finished with an above 500 record and 185 below. That is such an even split. Okay. Against teams that were under 500 last year, they hit 191, 243, 289. Against teams that were over 500, they hit 266, 368, 506. That is a 342 point difference in OPS. 532 to 874. I'm going to hit pause again because I want to see what the ER. You ready for this? I wasn't, but I'm ready to give it to you now. Against teams under 500, an ERA of 1.88 with a strikeout to walk ratio of 58 to 12. Against teams over 500, that ERA is 7.03 with a strikeout to walk ratio of 35 to 19. So, what does that tell you? It tells me that Bryan Woo feasted on crap. And give him credit for doing the job against crap. And there were some good starts against good teams. 6 innings of 1-run baseball against the Astros in a huge start. But he got absolutely lit up by good teams for the most part. And pitched really effectively against the Oaklands. ERA of 0 against Oakland. 1.8 in his 1 start against the Nationals. 2.79 in his 2 starts against the White Sox. 2.2 against the Angels. But he looked good in those starts too. Don't get me wrong. Bryan Woo looked really good in those outings. And even in the outings where he struggled, like that disaster that he had against the Twins, there were flashes. But I also think that this was a pitcher that absolutely feasted on having a fastball that has a ton of spin, which is why I don't even think it's insulting to say that. What I think it says, though, is Bryan Woo has to make a significant jump in command and using his secondary offerings to make the step that you might think that he might make. It's certainly possible, but there is work to be done here, folks, because you watched him pitch against the Rangers. He was awful. And if he cannot develop that slider or a curveball or a change, and he threw some changeups and they all got lit up. If he can't develop something bendy or a changeup that has some fade, I don't think he can be anything more than a back-end starter. There's time for him to figure it out. And heck, I don't even think Bryan Woo is necessarily a lock to make the opening day rotation. But while I am excited for his future, I think there is reason for caution as well because of the numbers I just laid out to you. So, I mean, I knew that he was really good against bad and really crappy against not bad. I can't say that I thought it was going to be that extreme. So yeah, Bryan Woo, what do you think? Is he a lock to make the rotation? Is he someone you would consider in a trade? It's going to be interesting. Again, thought there were real flashes from Bryan Woo. And overall, I think you call the season a success story. But I'm not quite ready to anoint him as the next great Seattle Mariner pitcher either. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. I just recorded four in a row of these, and my voice is just killing me. You can probably hear it. More to come. Bryan Woo, what do you think?